Before Egypt built its pyramids or Greece told its myths, a civilization appeared from the mud between two rivers. It came suddenly, completely, and mysteriously. The Sumerians built cities where none had stood before. They carved laws into clay, mapped the stars, and then disappeared. No one knows where they came from or why they left. What they left behind are pieces, tablets, temples, songs, and clues to a story that is hard to explain. Some call them the first humans to understand the gods. Others call them the last children of a forgotten world. Tonight, we follow those clues. 10 mysteries written in stone and starlight to discover what even time could not erase. This is 10 Unsolved Secrets of the Ancient Sumerians. Number 10. The King List. Deep beneath the quiet halls of Oxford's Ashmolean Museum sits a block of baked clay. Its surface, covered with thousands of wedge-shaped cuneiform marks, holds one of the most puzzling records of the ancient world. To someone walking by, it looks like an ordinary tablet. But to historians, it is a doorway into a time when history and myth mix together. The Sumerian King List. Its first line reads like the opening of a sacred text. When kingship came down from heaven, it was in Eridu. It's a simple sentence, but it changes how the Sumerians saw history. To them, kingship was not invented by humans. It was a divine gift given from the sky. Eridu, one of the world's earliest cities near today's Abu Sharain in southern Iraq, was the place where heaven's rule first touched the earth. What comes after that line makes no sense. The list names 8 rulers who ruled before the Great Flood, the pre-flood kings. Each lived for so long it seems impossible. Ululim of Eridu ruled for 28,800 years. Alagar for 36,000. And Menluana for 43,200. The total time before the flood, according to the tablets, is more than 241,200 years. Then the record states, then the flood swept over. Afterward, new kings appear. Their rule gets shorter, from thousands of years to hundreds, then to decades. For over a century, scholars have struggled to explain these numbers. Some say they are symbolic, a literary way to honor legendary rulers. Others argue that the numbers hide astronomical cycles. They used base 60 math to measure not years, but lunar months or solar movements. When changed, many reigns match known space patterns like the 26,000-year movement of Earth's axis, or the 360-day ideal solar year that controlled ancient calendars. These figures may not describe lifespans at all, but the rhythm of the universe as seen through divine kingship. Archaeology adds more mystery. The earliest copies of the list, including the Weld-Blundell prism dating to around 1800 BCE, were not unique. 18 versions have been found across Mesopotamia, written in both Sumerian and Akkadian. Each is slightly different, suggesting it was a living document, rewritten to make new dynasties look legitimate. Kings of Ur and Kish copied it to prove their divine right to rule, tracing their family line back to heaven itself. Yet beneath this political layer lies something older, stranger, and harder to explain. Beneath the ruins of Eridu, archaeologists discovered 18 layers of living spaces stacked one on top of another, like pages in a book. The oldest dating to around 5,400 BCE shows temples lined up with space patterns. This proves that Eridu had already been a sacred site long before written history. If the Sumerians believed kingship came down from heaven there, it may not have been a metaphor. It could show a real memory of an ancient migration, a people who arrived with advanced knowledge, suddenly changing the landscape into civilization. The King List's most haunting feature, though, is the flood. Around the same area at Shuruppak, diggers in the 1920s uncovered a deep layer of mud, a massive flood deposit stretching for miles, dated by radiocarbon to around 2900 BCE. Beneath it lay pre-flood houses, above it, a new culture. This boundary lines up exactly with the change between pre-flood and post-flood kings in the list. What had long been dismissed as myth now had geological proof. Across other ancient records, echoes of this disaster multiply. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the Atrahasis epic, and later the Book of Genesis all describe a flood that swept over the world, destroying humanity, saving only one chosen survivor. These tales differ in detail, but not in meaning. A cleansing, a restart. Could it be that the Sumerians kept an ancient memory of a real global event, perhaps caused by sudden climate changes at the end of the Younger Dryas, around 10,800 BCE, when sea levels rose and entire coastlines vanished? Some researchers have compared the reigns of the pre-flood kings to cycles of climate and geology. Each huge number may represent a geological age, the time between environmental resets. In that sense, the King List would not be political propaganda, but a scientific record in mythic form. The memory of Earth's repeated disasters written as the reigns of gods. The coming down of kingship would mark the return of order after chaos, the rebirth of civilization from flood to flood. Yet, not all evidence is symbolic. Several kings listed after the flood, such as Etana of Kish, Lugalbanda, and Gilgamesh of Uruk, appear in separate inscriptions and monuments. Their names have been found on bricks, temple dedications, and artifacts. This mixing of real rulers with impossible reigns creates a problem that still puzzles scholars. How do you separate legend from history when the ancients never drew that line? Modern imaging techniques are giving us new ways to study the tablets. 3D laser scanning allows researchers to map every wedge mark with tiny accuracy, showing corrections, erasures, and notes made by scribes thousands of years apart. The prism surface shows that the list was not a frozen artifact, but a collection of memory, a story continually rewritten as kingdoms rose and fell. In that sense, it mirrors the very civilization it describes, lasting but never fixed. Still, the question remains, where did these extraordinary numbers come from? Why record them so carefully if they were never meant to be read as real? When the Sumerians spoke of a king ruling for 36,000 years, perhaps they were not exaggerating, but hiding meaning, expressing that these figures represented ages of divine order, not mortal time. The language of the gods was number, and only those who learned its mystery could read between the symbols. Some modern thinkers, from historians like Samuel Noah Kramer to independent researchers, have guessed that the list may preserve the memory of prehistoric advanced cultures wiped out by floods or climate collapse, whose knowledge started early Mesopotamia. Others warn that such claims risk turning evidence into myth, reminding us that archaeology, not imagination, must have the last word. And yet, each new discovery, each flood layer, each star alignment pushes that boundary further. The King List remains one of humanity's most extraordinary puzzles, part mythology, part datasheet, a record that bridges the divine and the real. It tells of a time when human memory reached back before history, when rulers were measured not by deeds, but by the cosmos itself. Number 9, the ziggurat. In the desert of southern Iraq, where the wind moves like an ancient breath across empty plains, a giant of brick and dust still rises from the earth, silent, geometric, eternal. This is the great ziggurat of Ur, the most lasting monument of Sumer. To stand before it is to feel the weight of 4,000 years pressing into a single view, a stairway that once connected heaven and earth. The ziggurat was built around 2100 BCE during the reign of King Ur-Nammu, founder of the third dynasty of Ur, Archaeologists date its construction to the same time as the pyramids of Egypt's Middle Kingdom, yet its design idea is completely different. The Egyptian pyramid pointed upward in stillness. The ziggurat was built to be climbed, a mountain made by human hands. Rising in shrinking layers, its base measured about 64 by 46 meters. And though its top is long gone, scholars estimate it once reached nearly 30 meters high, the tallest structure in Mesopotamia. Its purpose, however, remains one of archaeology's great riddles. Officially, the ziggurat was a temple platform dedicated to Nana, the moon god and protector of Ur. Ancient hymns describe it as a mountain of brightness, a stairway for the gods. On its top stood a small shrine where priests offered food, incense, and song to the god believed to live above. At night, when the moon rose, its white light washed over the bricks until the entire structure glowed like silver. To the Sumerians, it was not just architecture. It was cosmic order built in clay. When Sir Leonard Woolley dug at the site in the 1920s, he discovered that the visible structure was only a part of its story. Beneath the baked bricks of Ur-Nammu's time lay older layers, foundations of mud brick and reed mats dating centuries earlier. This was not the first ziggurat. It was a rebuilding, perhaps of a design already ancient. Even Ur-Nammu's own inscriptions call his project a restoration of the House of Nana, suggesting that he was reviving, not inventing, a sacred plan. What did these early builders know that made them rebuild the same form again and again? The answer may lie in their relationship with the sky. Archaeologists have noted that the ziggurat's corners are lined up almost perfectly with the main directions, north, south, east, and west. The main staircase faces the rising point of the moon during the equinoxes. This alignment suggests the builders were not only honoring the gods, but measuring the heavens. The ziggurat may have worked as both a lunar observatory and a calendar in brick that tracks space cycles long before mechanical astronomy. Across Mesopotamia, dozens of ziggurats once towered over their cities at Uruk, Eridu, Nippur, Larsa, and Babylon. Each was dedicated to a local god. Yet, their design followed the same plan, a terraced mountain symbolizing the cosmic axis, the link between heaven, earth, and the underworld. In Akkadian, the word zikkuratu means to rise up, echoing both a physical climb and a spiritual one. In Sumerian belief, the universe was a three-layered structure. The heavens of Anu above, the earth of Enlil in the middle, and the abyss of Enki below. The ziggurat represented that order in stone. To climb it was to retrace the path of creation itself. Priests climbed the stairways carrying offerings, bread, oil, wine, while musicians played lyres and drums at each level. The ceremony represented not worship from below, but meeting between worlds. On the top, a chosen priestess served as the earthly bride of the god, performing rituals that renewed the fertility of the land. Some texts describe these rituals as sacred marriages where divine and mortal met under the moonlight, ensuring the harmony of heaven and earth. Modern engineers are amazed by the ziggurat's survival. Built of sun-dried bricks at its center and kiln-fired bricks on the outside, the structure was held together with natural bitumen, a kind of ancient tar that waterproofed and strengthened it. The precision of its construction, the layering, the drainage system, the balance rivals modern methods. Even after thousands of years of wearing away, its center remains remarkably solid, an early victory of civil engineering. Satellite imaging and photogrammetry have shown further secrets. The ziggurat's base sits on a raised platform shaped like a cut-off cone, a design that spreads weight evenly and resists earthquakes. Underground radar has found chambers and passageways, possibly remains of older temple complexes. Nearby inscriptions mention astronomical observations, suggesting that priests recorded the movements of the moon and planets from its upper platform. Some researchers even proposed that the ziggurat served as a symbolic copy of Mount Ekur, the mythical mountain of the gods described in Sumerian hymns. The ziggurat's design, stairways leading to a vanished top, has haunted human imagination ever since. In later Mesopotamian legend, a similar structure appears under another name, the Tower of Babel. Though separated by centuries, both share the same goal: the attempt to bridge the divine and the human, to climb through knowledge and devotion. Genesis describes the tower as humanity's rebellion. The Sumerians may have seen it as an act of alignment. One myth warns that when men build too close to heaven, the gods send confusion among their languages. Perhaps a poetic echo of the collapse of old languages after Sumer's fall. Archaeologists working at the site in recent years have restored parts of the stairways, stabilizing the crumbling edges. Their drones capture haunting pictures from above. The ziggurat's base forming a perfect rectangle, its layers like steps in a forgotten equation. To the modern eye, it looks geometric. To the ancients, it was alive. Each level represented a layer of the cosmos. Each stair a prayer turned into architecture. Perhaps the lasting mystery of the ziggurat lies not in its function, but in its belief. It was both temple and telescope, altar and axis. It showed the belief that divinity was not distant, but measurable. That by understanding size and direction, humanity could find its place in the pattern of the universe. The Sumerians didn't build to challenge the heavens. They built to mirror them. What do you think? Were the ziggurats built by human hands, or do they hide traces of something far older? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you find this fascinating, don't forget to like the video to help spread the story of humanity's first civilization. Number 8. Gilgamesh and the Anunnaki Mystery. The story begins in Uruk, one of the oldest cities on Earth. Its walls stretch 6 miles around, rising from the plain like the bones of a forgotten giant. The bricks still bear the faint wedge-shaped marks of the world's first written language, cuneiform. And it is here, around 2100 BCE, that a legend was carved into clay. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest surviving story of humankind. The hero of that story, Gilgamesh, was not just a myth. Archaeologists have found his name carved on temple foundations and cylinder seals, identifying him as a historical king of Uruk around 2700 BCE. Yet the tale told of him is something greater than history. The journey of a man 2/3 divine and 1/3 mortal, searching for the one thing that gods had denied all men: immortality. In the Sumerian worldview, the gods known as the Anunnaki ruled from the heavens, but walked among humans. Their name means those of royal blood or those who came from the sky. They were not abstract gods of faith, but real forces, the personifications of cosmic order, fertility, storms, and destiny. Their leader was Anu, the father of heaven with his divine children, Enlil, lord of the air, and Enki, god of wisdom and the deep waters. Together, they form the great assembly of the Anunnaki, divine rulers of the universe. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, these gods are not distant watchers. They step in, advise, punish, and test. When Gilgamesh defies the laws of the cosmos by seeking eternal life, it is the Anunnaki who stand in judgment. Through his story, we see the Sumerian vision of humanity's relationship with the divine. Not blind worship, but conversation. Not obedience, but dialogue. The tablets that record his tale were discovered in the mid-19th century among the ruins of Nineveh, in the library of the Assyrian king, Ashurbanipal. Written in Akkadian, they preserve an older Sumerian oral tradition that likely dates back to 2000 BCE or earlier. The 11th tablet describes a great flood strangely similar to the biblical story of Noah, but coming before it by 1,000 years. In it, a man named Utnapishtim, the Sumerian Noah, survives a divine flood sent by the Anunnaki to cleanse the earth. The gods grant him eternal life, making him the last immortal. The secret Gilgamesh will cross the world to discover. To reach Utnapishtim, Gilgamesh must pass through places guarded by beings of impossible form. Scorpion men whose brightness is terrifying, whose look brings death. These creatures, half man and half beast, guard the twin mountains where the sun rises and sets. Beyond them lies the Sea of Death, and on its far shore, the survivor of the flood. Scholars understand this landscape as myth, but others see hidden astronomy. The scorpion men representing Scorpius on the horizon, the mountains symbolizing the equinoxes, the voyage through darkness marking the sun's nightly journey below the earth. The Anunnaki, however, remain the puzzle at the heart of this world. In thousands of cuneiform tablets, they appear as judges, watchers, and creators. Some are connected to stars and planets, Nana to the moon, Utu to the sun, Inanna to Venus. To the Sumerians, these were not metaphors, but real truths. Each god represented the intelligence of its heavenly body, its predictable yet divine movement across the sky. The heavens were not distant. They were a living map of power. Modern researchers have long been fascinated by the Anunnaki. Scholars understand them as mythological personifications of natural forces, a complex many-god system built on watching the stars. But in the 20th century, alternative theories appeared, most famously by authors like Zecharia Sitchin, who proposed that the Anunnaki were not gods at all, but ancient visitors from the stars, beings from a made-up planet Nibiru, who engineered humanity through genetic manipulation. Archaeologists, however, reject these explanations. There is no evidence of alien contact in Sumerian archaeology. The texts, when read correctly, do not describe spacecraft or technology, but rituals and cosmic metaphors. The Anunnaki were gods because they represented order over chaos, not because they flew from the sky in machines. Yet, Sitchin's theory stays in popular imagination because it speaks to something deeper, the persistent feeling that the Sumerians knew something we have forgotten. And perhaps in a sense, they did. The Sumerians were the first to map the stars systematically, to measure time by heavenly movement, to recognize the matching of lunar and solar cycles. Their gods were living patterns, the combination of mathematics and myth intertwined. When they said the Anunnaki came down from heaven, they may have been describing the appearance of cosmic order into the material world, the moment when human awareness recognized the structure behind the stars. In the epic, after surviving deserts, mountains, and the waters of death, Gilgamesh finally meets Utnapishtim, who tells him the truth. Immortality is not for men. The gods decided that when the gods created man, they kept eternal life in their own hands. Yet Utnapishtim offers him a test, to stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights, symbolizing the cycle of creation. Gilgamesh fails. He sleeps. For all his power, all his divinity, he cannot escape the nature of man. And yet the story does not end in sadness. Before Gilgamesh leaves, Utnapishtim tells him of a hidden plant. The old man becomes young again, growing at the bottom of the sea. Gilgamesh dives into the water, gets it, and begins the long journey home. But on his return, he stops to bathe. A snake steals the plant and sheds its skin, renewing itself, leaving Gilgamesh to return empty-handed. It's one of the most poetic moments in all ancient literature. Immortality escaping the grasp of man, returning to nature where it belongs. Through Gilgamesh, the Sumerians taught that eternity is not in living forever, but in creating something that does. And through the Anunnaki, the gods who measured the heavens, decided destinies, and watched from their mountain of judgment, they gave us the first framework of cosmic law, the belief that humanity's path mirrors the stars. Number 7. Aratta, the city that shouldn't exist. In the poems of ancient Sumer, there is a city more dazzling than any ruin archaeologists have ever found. A city of lapis lazuli walls, of gold that gleamed like sunlight on water. Its name was Aratta, and the Sumerians described it not as a myth, but as a real place far away, high in the mountains, beyond the 7 ranges. They said its craftspeople shaped metals finer than any in Uruk. Its temples glowed with gems from the heart of the earth, and its rulers spoke directly with the goddess Inanna. Yet for more than a century, digs across Mesopotamia have failed to find it. Aratta, the city of wonder, remains missing, and that absence is what makes it unforgettable. Our only map to Aratta comes from Sumerian literature, a cycle of myths known as Enmerkar and the Lord of Aratta, Enki and Ensugarana, and Lugalbanda in the mountain cave. These tales, written on clay tablets over 4,000 years old, tell of rivalry between 2 cities. Uruk, the rising power of the plains, and Aratta, its mysterious counterpart beyond the horizon. The king of Uruk, Enmerkar, wants to bring Aratta's riches to his city, its gold, its lapis lazuli, its artistry for the glory of Inanna. But Aratta refuses, claiming it is the holier city, chosen first by the goddess. What follows is not a war of swords, but of language. Enmerkar sends messengers to Aratta with demands written on clay tablets, some of the earliest references to writing in human history. The Lord of Aratta answers with challenges, riddles, and spells. The stories unfold as contests of wit and divine favor. Who can build the greater temple? Who can speak the truer prayer? Who can prove Inanna's love? Beneath their mythic tone lies something amazingly human, the echo of diplomacy, trade, and competition between 2 distant civilizations. For centuries, scholars thought Aratta was pure invention, a mythic mirror through which Sumerians explored their own ambitions. But the discovery of several archaeological sites has begun to change that view. In southeastern Iran, along the Halil River, digs at Jiroft uncovered an advanced Bronze Age culture dating to nearly the same time as early Sumer. Here, archaeologists found detailed chloride vases and stone carvings, some showing the same designs as Mesopotamian art: serpents, winged beings, and gods seated before altars. One cylinder seal even shows a temple front almost identical to those of Eridu. The artifacts of Jiroft display an artistry too developed to be random. They hint at an urban center, perhaps a network of cities that flourished around 3000 BCE, trading across the Iranian plateau. Chemical analysis of lapis lazuli beads from both Jiroft and Mesopotamia confirms a shared source: the Badakhshan mines of northeastern Afghanistan, nearly 1,500 kilometers away. It means that long before the Silk Road, ancient traders were already crossing mountains and deserts to move stone and gold. This web of exchange fits perfectly with the legends. Aratta, the far mountain city of treasures, may not have been a myth after all. The texts give even more clues. They describe Aratta as a city reachable only after crossing 7 mountains and 7 rivers, a poetic geography that matches the Zagros Mountains stretching east of Sumer. The climate data from that region, gathered through plant studies and core samples, suggests that during the 3rd millennium BCE, the area was fertile, watered by glacial melt, and capable of supporting complex societies. The line between myth and archaeology begins to blur. Aratta's legend also hides something deeper: a memory of competition between 2 worlds, the flat floodplains of Mesopotamia and the highlands beyond. Mesopotamian city-states depended on trade for raw materials. They lacked metals, stone, and timber. The mountain cultures, in turn, wanted the food surpluses and luxury goods of the plains. In the myths, Inanna's shifting favor between Uruk and Aratta may symbolize this very relationship, the constant pull between 2 halves of a single economy. And yet, Aratta refuses to fit neatly into history. Some historians see it not as a real city, but as a civilization symbol, a remembrance of an even earlier culture erased by the flood. The same ideas that describe Aratta, mountains of gold, rivers of precious stone, divine messengers crossing impossible distances, appear in myths from the Indus Valley, the Iranian Plateau, and even early Vedic texts. Could they all be pieces of one vanished tradition? Number 6. Queen Kubaba. In the dusty records of the past, amid endless lists of kings, warriors, and gods, there appears a single name that breaks the pattern. Kubaba, the only woman ever recorded in the Sumerian King List. She stands alone among hundreds of male rulers, her title preserved in clay for over 4,000 years. Kubaba, the woman tavern keeper who made firm the foundations of Kish. That one sentence carved into cuneiform has puzzled historians for a century. Who was this woman who rose from nowhere to rule a city-state? And why did history allow her name to survive when so many others faded into dust? The King List places Kubaba's reign around 2500 BCE, during a time when Sumer was divided into competing city kingdoms. Kish, her city, was one of the most powerful. Yet the record gives no family tree, no royal husband, no divine supporter. She was a common person, a woman of the tavern, a job viewed with both respect and suspicion in ancient Mesopotamia. But taverns were not the bad places we imagine today. In Sumer, they were social centers, places where merchants gathered, deals were made, and travelers exchanged news from distant lands. The tavern keeper was a communicator, a negotiator, a keeper of trust, the perfect spot for someone with ambition. Kubaba's rise may have begun there, behind the clay jars of beer and the smoke of oil lamps, listening to soldiers, scribes, and traders who shaped the city's politics. The Sumerians honored beer as a gift from the goddess Ninkasi, symbol of plenty and wisdom. Brewing was considered sacred work, and the tavern itself a space where mortal and divine could mix. Perhaps in a world still half mythic, Kubaba represented that in-between power, a woman of the hearth who became a woman of the throne. According to later tradition, her rule brought stability. The list says she made firm the foundations of Kish, a phrase scholars understand as peace, rebuilding, and prosperity after trouble. Archaeological layers from that time indeed show renewed city growth in the region. Walls repaired, trade revived, temples rebuilt. Though no monument of Kubaba herself survives, her influence may echo in the government tablets that follow her reign. Careful records of grain, labor, and taxation, the marks of a steady government. But what makes her story even more extraordinary is what came after. The King List credits her with starting a dynasty that lasted 100 years. Her descendants, the so-called dynasty of Kubaba, ruled Kish long after she was gone. That continuity in a time when power often shifted violently between rival cities is remarkable. It suggests not myth, but memory, a legacy preserved in systems strong enough to outlast a single life. Still, Kubaba's name did not remain bound to history alone. 1,000 years later, she reappears in a different form, as Kubaba, the goddess worshipped across Anatolia and northern Syria. Her image carved into rock reliefs at Carchemish, standing on a lion and holding a pomegranate. Here she is no longer a tavern keeper, but the Queen of Heaven, Mother of Kings, Protector of Cities. By the first millennium BCE, the Hittites and Phrygians had transformed her into Cybele, the great mother of Mount Ida, a goddess of wild nature and rebirth whose worship would later spread through Greece and Rome. How did a mortal queen of Sumer become the mother of gods in Anatolia? Scholars still debate the connection, but word and cultural evidence is strong. The name Kubaba changes only slightly across the centuries. Her traits, lions, fertility, divine motherhood remaining constant. It's as if the memory of her reign survived not through family line but through mythic change, crossing languages and borders, until history turned her into legend. Kubaba's transformation shows something important about the ancient world, the thin boundary between ruler and god. In early Mesopotamia, Kings were seen as the chosen of gods, and queens as representation of divine rules. The priestess Enheduanna, daughter of Sargon of Akkad, would later become the first named author in history, writing hymns to the goddess Inanna that describe a union between woman, word, and power. Kubaba was her predecessor, the proof that a woman could hold sacred and political power in one body. As the centuries passed, male-dominated empires replaced the female echoes of the early Bronze Age. The divine feminine pulled back into myth. Her power watered down into symbols of fertility or motherhood. Kubaba's story, preserved in clay but stripped of context, became an oddity. One line in a list of kings. Yet her survival through time, surviving as goddess when her male counterparts vanished, speaks volumes. She outlasted them not by force, but by transformation. And so, in the endless list of kings, the lone woman survives, the tavern keeper who became the mother of civilizations, the mortal whose memory refused to die. Number 5. The mathematical code. Long before Greece had its geometry or Egypt its sacred measurements, the Sumerians were already counting the heavens. Their mathematics was so advanced, so exact, that modern engineers still use its patterns today. Every clock, every compass, every angle in a circle is a whisper from their world. But what makes their system truly mysterious is not just its skill. It's that no one can explain why they chose it or where it came from. The Sumerians did not count by tens like we do. Their entire mathematical universe revolved around the number 60. 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 360 degrees in a circle. We still live inside their system 5,000 years later. Other cultures chose 12s or 20s, but Sumer chose a number that holds harmony, a number divisible by more factors than any other between 1 and 100. To them, 60 was perfect. To us, it feels chosen. Clay tablets from Uruk, Sippar, and Nippur, dating to nearly 2000 BCE, reveal the amazing range of their calculations. They knew how to divide, multiply, and calculate square and cube roots. One tablet, known as Plimpton 322, discovered in the ruins of Larsa, contains a list of what mathematicians now call Pythagorean triples, sets of numbers that satisfy the rule of right triangles. It was written 1,500 years before Pythagoras was born. The accuracy of its ratios suggests it was not an abstract exercise, but a practical tool perhaps for surveying architecture, or even astronomical observation. This system, known as sexagesimal, used cuneiform wedges to represent numbers from 1 to 59, repeating in cycles, much like the hands of a clock. The Sumerians didn't need a zero, yet they understood the idea of positional value, the very foundation of modern arithmetic. When they carved those marks into clay, they were doing something no one else had done before. They were turning time, space, and divinity into numbers. In Sumerian mythology, all knowledge, from farming to astronomy, came from the god Enki, lord of water and wisdom, who kept the divine laws of civilization. Among these laws was the gift of measure, the art of balance and order. To measure the world was to speak the language of the gods. Every brick in a temple, every channel of an irrigation canal was laid according to a geometry that reflected cosmic harmony. At Eridu, one of the oldest cities on Earth, archaeologists uncovered a series of temples built on the same site over thousands of years. Each rebuilding kept the same sizes and direction, always lined up to the main directions. This continuity wasn't chance. The Sumerians believed architecture had to mirror the structure of the cosmos. A base of the temple symbolized the earth, its roof, the heavens. Between them ran the vertical line, the line of communication with the divine. In modern mathematical terms, their cities were fractals of the sky. Even their ziggurats, those stepped mountains of brick, follow exact ratios. The height of each level decreased in perfect geometric steps, creating an optical trick of balance from every angle. When viewed from above, the ziggurat's edge divided into 360 equal units. The circle of the year. Every stairway, every level matched a planetary or lunar path. One of the most interesting parts of Sumerian math lies in its astronomical connections. The number 60 appears repeatedly in the sky. 6 times 60, the ideal days of a year. 12 times 30, the cycle. The division of the ecliptic into constellations. The Sumerians mapped the heavens into 12 houses, each representing a portion of the sun's path, the earliest form of the zodiac. These were not merely astrological signs. They were a cosmic clock marking the turning of ages. Scientists today studying the Sumerian calendar note its matching with precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that shifts the stars over thousands of years. To detect that pattern requires observations spanning thousands of years. Either the Sumerians inherited this knowledge from much older traditions, or their priest astronomers kept careful records for generations. In either case, it suggests an intellectual continuity rare in the ancient world. Recent digital reconstructions have allowed researchers to recreate Sumerian star maps using planetarium software. When lined up to the skies of 3000 BCE, certain temple directions, particularly at Nippur, match lunar standstills in the rising of Venus at specific times. These alignments suggest that their mathematics wasn't abstract, but based on watching, grounded in the movements of the real heavens above their cities. And perhaps that's why their system survived. Long after Sumer fell, the mathematics of 60 survived through Babylonian astronomy, Greek geometry, Roman engineering, and into the modern world. Every rotation of the clock's hands is a relic of that ancient code. A code so perfect it never needed to be rewritten. Number 4. The merchants of eternity. Before empire, before coin, before the idea of nations, the first great economy on earth was already flowing. Not through digital screens or caravans of gold, but through boats of reeds and sails made from woven flax drifting down the rivers of ancient Sumer. They carried barley, copper, wool, lapis lazuli, and the dream of connection. The men and women aboard them were not conquerors. They were the world's first merchants, the silent builders of globalization, 5,000 years before the word existed. At the dawn of the 3rd millennium BCE, Sumer was a network of city-states, Uruk, Lagash, Eridu, Kish, scattered like islands across the floodplain between the Tigris and Euphrates. The land was fertile, but it lacked the raw materials of progress. No stone for carving, no metal for tools, no timber for temples. What the Sumerians had instead was imagination and rivers that led to the sea. Those twin gifts became their lifeline. Through them, they reached outward into the unknown. Archaeologists have recovered a stunning record of this outward reach. Thousands of cuneiform tablets describe voyages, contracts, and shipments. They mention foreign lands by name: Dilmun, Magan, and Maluha. Dilmun, now identified with the island of Bahrain, was a vital trading center, linking Mesopotamia with the copper mines of Oman and the civilizations beyond the Arabian Sea. Magan, likely the coast of Oman itself, supplied the pure copper that fueled the Bronze Age revolution. And Malaha, a name that long puzzled scholars, is now believed to refer to the Indus Valley Civilization, a vast city culture in what is now Pakistan and northwestern India. Seals from Sumer have been found in the ruins of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, their wedge-like carvings still sharp after 5,000 years. Likewise, Indus-style carnelian beads and ivory combs have been dug up in Mesopotamian graves. The evidence is clear. Trade connected the two cradles of civilization, separated by more than 1,000 miles of desert and sea. Sumerian merchants were already sailing the Persian Gulf, hugging the coastlines of Iran and Arabia, sailing in ships built of date palm wood sealed with bitumen. In one ancient tablet, a merchant describes a voyage from Ur to Dilmun. He lists his cargo, textiles, silver and grain, and the return goods, copper, gold, and rare stones. The text ends with an offering to Enki, god of water and wisdom, asking for calm seas. It is both prayer and business record, a reminder that in Sumer, trade was sacred. The god Enki was said to have built the first canals, linking the freshwater of his domain to the salty sea. To cross that boundary was to step into his realm, a world where knowledge flowed as freely as the tides. Archaeological imagery confirms these routes. Satellite scans show the remains of ancient harbors on the Gulf Coast at Ras Al Jins in Oman, Failaka in Kuwait, and Bahrain's Qalat al-Bahrain fortress. There divers have found stone anchors, copper tools, and pieces of Mesopotamian pottery mixed with local goods. These finds form a maritime map stretching from the mouth of the Euphrates to the shores of the Indus. It is the first global supply chain built not by kings or armies, but by merchants who believed the sea was a highway, not a barrier. As trade grew, Sumer developed the structure to manage it. The world's first accountants appeared, scribes hunched over clay tablets, recording every transaction with pens cut from reeds. They invented receipts, ledgers, and contracts, pressing the wet clay with their seals to prove it was real. Some tablets still bear fingerprints, those of the merchants who signed their names in clay instead of ink. Others include lists of crew members, inventories of cargo, and notes of interest rates. These were not simple traders, but disciplined money managers. The earliest example of credit, a delayed payment on a shipment, dates to this time. Civilization's financial heartbeat began here. Economically, Sumer's success reshaped the world. As copper from Magan fed bronze workshops in Ur, and lapis from Badakhshan gleamed in temples, trade transformed Sumerian society. Merchants gained status alongside priests and nobles. Some even became ambassadors representing their city-states abroad. It was an early form of soft power, diplomacy through business. Scientific analysis has shown just how vast this system was. Using chemical fingerprinting, researchers have traced kin and copper artifacts found in Mesopotamia to sources as far as Afghanistan and Central Asia. Chemical residue tests on ancient jars from Ur show traces of imported oils and resins, frankincense, myrrh, and cedar, substances that linked Mesopotamia to Arabia and the Levant. One tablet even records the arrival of a ship carrying black stone from Meluha, likely obsidian, a volcanic glass prized for its sharpness and mystery. It is telling that the oldest known world map discovered in Babylon is based on a Sumerian model. A circular world surrounded by the cosmic sea with cities and mountains arranged in geometric order. The merchant's journey had become the template for the cosmos. Yet trade is never without danger. Storms, piracy, and political trouble haunted every route. Some trips never returned. In the tombs of Ur, archaeologists found shell-inlaid mosaics showing ships and lines of traders carrying goods. Eternal tributes to the men who turned danger into prosperity. Over centuries, Sumer's trade web thickened, then unraveled. As the rivers filled with silt and rival powers rose, Akkad, Babylon, Assyria, the center shifted, but the pattern remained. The routes blazed by Sumerian merchants became the arteries of history, the Persian Gulf trade, the Silk Road, the maritime highways of the Indian Ocean. Every empire that followed merely inherited the map they drew. Number 3. Ancient Sumerian seals. In the ruins of ancient Sumer, archaeologists sometimes uncover objects, no larger than a man's thumb. Small cylinders of stone polished smooth, carved with scenes so detailed that even under magnification, the details defy belief. These are the Sumerian cylinder seals, among the most extraordinary artifacts ever made by human hands. The first seals appeared around 3500 BCE during the Uruk period, the same age that saw the birth of writing. They were tools of identity and power used to sign documents, mark property, and protect containers of goods. But in Sumer, practical and sacred were never separate. A seal was not just a signature. It was a soul. To press one seal on clay was to leave a spiritual imprint, proof that the owner, the god, and the act itself were lined up. The materials chosen for these seals were never random. Craftsmen worked with hard shining stones, lapis lazuli, hematite, serpentine, calcite, brought in from far lands through the same trade routes that linked Sumer to Iran and Afghanistan. Each color carried symbolism: blue for divinity, green for fertility, black for protection. Using drills tipped with copper and grinding powders, they carved lines so fine that modern jewelers struggle to copy them. Some seals show cuts no thicker than a strand of hair. Spirals carved so exactly they seem to require magnification or spinning tools. When looked at under microscopes, the craftsmanship amazes. Grooves are perfectly even. Tiny dots appear where no human hand could have placed them by chance. Scholars debate whether the Sumerians used simple lathes or bow drills, both known from later Mesopotamian workshops. However they did it, the result was technical mastery centuries ahead of its time. But it is what the seals show that turns amazement into mystery. Many show ordinary life: farmers working fields, merchants weighing goods, shepherds driving flocks. Yet others open windows into a cosmic imagination. Gods with horned crowns coming out from mountains. Winged figures offering rings and rods of power. Stars arranged in perfect circles. Some seals show what looks like the solar system, a central star surrounded by balls of various sizes. One from Sippar shows the sun disk radiating from the center, encircled by planets. Scholars warn against reading too much into it, but the accuracy with which the Sumerians tracked space bodies suggests that these images were not random. They were maps of divine order, expressions of astronomy, translated into myth. In Sumerian belief, the universe was a living order. The heavens of Anu, the earth of Enlil, and the waters of Enki formed a three-layered cosmos. The seals mirror this structure. Often a central figure, a god or priest, stands between two worlds, one above, one below. The design flows sideways but symbolizes up and down movement, going up and going down, communication between divine and mortal. Rolling the seal across clay recreated this motion as if the act of printing it made the invisible visible. Some scholars see these seals as early forms of writing, a visual shorthand that came before cuneiform. Repeated images, the tree, the sun disk, the winged creature, work like symbols, shrinking complex ideas into symbols. This theory finds support in their spread. Seals appear in temples, palaces, and archives, often beside tablets. They were both art and text, meant to be read as much as admired. Archaeological context strengthens this understanding. At the site of Uruk, diggers found thousands of seal impressions pressed onto storage jar lids, doors, and even temple offerings. Each seal belonged to a person or group, a priest, an official, a workshop. To break a seal was to break a promise. The imprint was not just decoration, it was a legal and spiritual guarantee. This connection between sealing and holiness survives even today in the way we still seal contracts or seal our promises. The word itself is Sumer's gift. Modern imaging has shown layers unseen by early archaeologists. Under infrared light and 3D scanning, restorers detect paint remains trapped in grooves. Traces of paint or dye once rubbed into the carvings to make the impressions bright. Under magnification, hidden tiny writing appears, tiny cuneiform marks recording names or prayers. What once seemed purely decorative turns out to be both text and charm. The accuracy of these objects has even inspired guesses that the Sumerians had optical aids, polished crystal lenses, or curved mirrors used to make detail bigger. Archaeological finds such as the Nimrud lens discovered in Assyria much later, but within the same tradition show that ancient craftsmen understood how to bend light. If similar tools existed in earlier Sumer, they could explain the near-microscopic craftsmanship of the seals. Number 2. The brew of immortality. In the temples of ancient Sumer, where the air shimmered with the smell of incense and grain, the people sang to a goddess who was neither a warrior nor a queen, but a brewer. Her name was Ninkasi, the lady who fills the mouth, and her art was considered sacred. To the Sumerians, beer was not a luxury or a treat. It was a bridge between the human and the divine. Every jar of foaming liquid, every sip drawn through a straw of reed, was part of a ritual as old as civilization itself. Archaeologists have found traces of this devotion in the ruins of Godin Tepe in Iran and Uruk in southern Iraq. Remains of barley, emmer wheat, and yeast stuck in pottery pieces nearly 6,000 years old. Chemical analysis of these remains showed the clear signs of fermentation, making them the earliest physical evidence of beer on Earth. Yet the Sumerians did not see brewing as chemistry. They saw it as transformation, an act that mirrored creation itself. Decay turning to life, chaos to order, grain to spirit. In the famous hymn to Ninkasi carved into clay around 1800 BCE, the process is described step by step, grinding the malt, mixing it with honey and water, fermenting it in great jars sealed with clay. You are the one who bakes the vapor in the great oven. The hymn sings, you are the one who waters the malt set on the ground. You pour out the filtered beer like the rush of the Tigris and Euphrates. These lines are both prayer and recipe, the earliest brewing manual in history. Beer was woven into every part of Sumerian life. It was a staple of the diet, a daily wage for brewers, a ritual offering to the gods. In temple records from Lagash and Ur, scribes carefully listed the amounts of beer given to workers, sometimes as much as 2 liters per person per day. It kept them alive when the water was unsafe to drink and the sun burned the fields dry. It also played a role in medicine. Doctors prescribed beer mixed with herbs as treatments for sicknesses ranging from fever to childbirth pains. And in myth, beer became the agent of civilization itself. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the wild man Enkidu becomes human only after tasting beer. He drank the beer, 7 jugs, and his heart grew light. His face shone and he sang with joy. He became wise and full of thought. It is a transformation more profound than any weapon or crown, from animal to man, through the magic of fermentation. Beer, not bronze, marked the true beginning of civilization. Scientists today understand what the Sumerians sensed. Fermentation is one of nature's oldest chemical miracles. Yeast eats sugar and produces alcohol, transforming the raw into the refined. It is the same process that makes bread rise and wine sparkle. In Sumer, this process symbolized rebirth, a divine rhythm that echoed the cycle of the seasons. The foaming of a vat was like the flooding of the rivers, the renewal of life from decay. Recent experiments by archaeologists at the University of Chicago and Brewing Science Institute have recreated Sumerian beer using Ninkasi's hymn as a guide. The result is a cloudy, mildly sour drink, thick with grain, tasting somewhere between ale and bread soup. What surprised researchers was its nutritional value, rich in proteins, minerals, and B vitamins. Beer in ancient Sumer wasn't merely intoxicating, it was nourishing, almost sacred food. The connection between beer and divinity was more than symbolic. In temple reliefs, priests are shown offering cups of beer to the gods. And in royal tombs such as those dug at Ur by Sir Leonard Woolley, silver cups and long golden straws were found placed beside the dead. Even in the afterlife, the Sumerians believed the gods would expect offerings of beer. It was the drink that bound both worlds. Number 1. The day Sumer disappeared. The final days of Sumer did not arrive with an explosion. They came quietly like the fading of light after sunset. The rivers still flowed. The ziggurat of still cast its long shadow across the plain. The scribes still pressed their reeds into wet clay, their tablets drying under the same harsh sun. But something invisible had begun to unravel. The first civilization on Earth, the people who invented writing, kingship, and the calendar, was slowly dying. Around 2100 BCE, Sumer was the jewel of Mesopotamia. Its cities, Uruk, Lagash, Nippur, Eridu, thrived under kings who called themselves shepherds of the people. They built temples that touched the sky, and canals that stitched the desert into gardens. They measured the heavens, and wrote their laws in clay. And then within a few centuries, it was gone. The language of Sumer fell silent, its people scattered, and its achievements absorbed by other empires. How could something so vast and advanced simply vanish? Archaeology provides the first clues. Beneath the ruins of cities like and Lagash, scientists have found thick salt layers in the soil, evidence of irrigation gone wrong. For centuries, the Sumerians had controlled the Tigris and Euphrates to flood their fields. But the water carried salt from the desert. As generations passed, the soil grew poisoned. Crops died. Grain harvests collapsed. Tablets from the late 3rd millennium record a desperate change. Wheat fields replaced by barley, a plant more resistant to salt. But even barley began to fail. By 2100 BCE, harvests had fallen by half. Civilization was starving. Climate data from ice cores and sediment samples tells a darker story. Around 2200 BCE, a massive drought struck the Near East, an event scientists call the 4.2 kiloyear aridification event. The monsoon weakened, rainfall stopped, and dust storms swept across Mesopotamia. Lakes dried, rivers shrank, and entire regions turned to dust. This wasn't a local misfortune. It was global. Across Egypt, China, and the Indus Valley, civilizations struggled in the same centuries. For Sumer, already weakened by environmental mismanagement, the drought was a death sentence. But nature was not the only enemy. As the south suffered, the north rose. New powers appeared in Akkad and later in Babylon. Nomadic groups from the mountains, the Gudians, raided the weakened cities, attacking Uruk and Kish. Tablets from that time read like sad poems. The storm that destroys cities roared against the land. The gods have abandoned us. One of the most haunting of these, known as the Lament for Ur, describes priests wandering the ruins, crying that even the gods' temples have fallen. It is the first recorded sad song for a civilization, a people aware of their own extinction. When archaeologist Leonard Woolley dug the royal tombs of in the 1920s, he found gold lyres, jeweled headdresses, and banquet scenes frozen in death. He also found signs of collapse, evidence of mass burials and flood layers between cultural levels. Beneath Ur's final glory lay mud and ash, silent witnesses to a disaster that no army could reverse. The flood remembered in Sumerian myth may have been not a single flood, but a metaphor for time itself washing civilization away. Yet the end of Sumer is not a story of destruction, but of transformation. Their language, though no longer spoken, became the sacred language of priests and scholars for nearly 2,000 years. The Akkadians adopted it. Babylon preserved it. And even in Assyrian times, students still learned Sumerian hymns as we now study Latin. In that sense, Sumer never truly vanished. It simply changed form, dissolving into the cultures it had inspired. The physical evidence of that continuity is everywhere. The cuneiform script born in Sumer evolved into Akkadian, Elamite, and Hittite writing systems. Their base 60 mathematics still measures our time and angles. Their myths of a great flood, of gods coming down from the heavens, of a hero seeking immortality, became the backbone of later religions. The Epic of Gilgamesh, copied and translated across empires, preserved Sumer's voice long after its people were gone. Modern digs show how this cycle unfolded. As southern Mesopotamia dried, populations moved northward to more fertile lands. The power center shifted from Ur and Eridu to Babylon and Assur. The Sumerian identity faded, but their inventions survived. Architecture, law, and myth passing through generations like DNA of culture. What vanished was not knowledge, but name. Still, some mysteries remain. In recent years, satellite imaging has uncovered traces of vast canal systems stretching far beyond the known city boundaries. Some canals lead into what are now empty deserts, suggesting that Sumer once managed landscapes far larger than historians imagined. Others end in dry basins that may have been ancient lakes long evaporated. If these systems were abandoned suddenly as the droughts got worse, the collapse may have been faster and more dramatic than we thought. A warning written in earth. Scientists analyzing ancient pollen grains and sediment cores from the Persian Gulf have found a sharp decline in wetland species around 2000 BCE, replaced by salt-tolerant plants. It's the biological signature of emptiness. Nature recording what tablets describe in poetry. The gods didn't abandon Sumer, the environment did. And in that story lies a timeless lesson that even the greatest civilizations depend on balance between human ambition and the planet that supports it. Yet many mysteries remain surrounding the fall of the Sumerian civilization. Historians and archaeologists are still digging deeper, searching for what truly happened. Whether it was climate, conquest, or something far more complex that erased the first great culture of humankind. What do you think caused the fall of Sumer? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey into the world's first civilization, don't forget to like the video.